All right, peoples. A little update first and foremost that Bloodworld is coming soon. All right, that Kickstarter is definitely coming soon. Still working on it, but of course, like I said, within the next month at the very latest, I'd say we're gonna launch. Okay, so I'll give you the exact date. Be ready for that shit. It's gonna be fire. Enjoy some music with me for a second, okay? As we talk about this hip hop, we take it back to the essence, right? I love this fucking instrumental, man. I always love this song. It does something for me, man. And I was even born when this shit came around. Beautiful, right? It's like cowboy music almost, you know what I mean? That like Lone Ranger shit. It's beautiful. Anyway, hip hop, where did it all start from? Who was there? All that stuff, the questions, right? Anyway, my favorite part, obviously, and this is why we'll talk about Made You Look a little bit. We remember this. Tonto, jump on it. That shit's funny. Crazy, right? And then, of course, one of the greatest rap records ever made. Again, I talk about Made You Look, but this is really like the Nas's like moment part 2. You know what I mean? Like, Nas can do shit like this, where it's just like, what the fuck? This is one of the greatest beats ever made. I've already talked about Made You Look. You know, we're not gonna cover it too tough, but just taking it back to that essence. You know what I mean? When you look at Made You Look, the video, the rap, they're like, that is fucking hip hop. If someone was like, what's hip hop? That's hip hop. At its highest level, actually. So, to address the Fat Joe comments and all that shit, let me think here. I gotta be honest with you. Obviously, I think this shit is bullshit what he's saying. Is it frustrating that someone on Fat Joe's level would say something like that? Yes, it is, of course, because he's fucking the rap game up by saying shit like that, right? And the issue is this, right? You know, when you don't put out the truth, it gets mangled, and it's very easy to distort the truth, right? I'll get into that in a second as well. So, do I think that blacks and Latinos equally created hip hop? No, of course not. I think that's bullshit. Respectfully, of course, I love Latinos, right? All of y'all, right? I'm a people person in general. I like people. You know what I'm saying? I love my black people and I love people in general. If you good peoples, I'll fuck with you. Do you know what I'm saying? I have no problems giving credit to, you know, where it's due. But at the end of the day, right? And this is coming from someone who wasn't there. Okay, so sure, you can be like, tochiRTA, I don't care what your opinion is. You just a fan. You were in Saudi. You weren't even old enough when the shit was invented. Of course, I'm saying this as someone who was not there, who got into hip hop through the internet. Okay, so I am not an authority figure when it comes to rap. However, based on what makes common sense and what I've observed from people who probably were there, like Grandmaster Kaz and others who have given their opinion, I watch interviews, I listen to shit, I try to analyze it, right? And based off that, it doesn't make sense that Latinos and black people equally created hip hop. That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, Kool Herc, who is often given the sort of creator figure, the father of this rap shit, is West Indian. I get that. Jamaicans didn't create hip hop either, okay? Because hip hop is something unique. It's very different, okay? Now, does that mean that hip hop takes elements of what Jamaicans were doing to a certain degree and brings it to the United States? Of course, right? I love my Jamaican folk, right? My West Indian folk in general. Jamaicans are imitated like crazy. They're some of the most imitated musically people on the planet. You know what I'm saying? So of course, you know, it doesn't surprise me that something as great as hip hop would come partially out of Jamaica. Partially, again, right? In a sense. But again, hip hop is its own thing. Hip hop is very unique. And hip hop as a form, an art form that really started to really kick it off is a musical art form. Okay, so when people start saying, oh, you know, those are white graffiti artists and white people been doing graffiti, so clearly they were there when hip hop was created. Stop it, okay? Stop it. What yes, they're the different elements, and I get that people are always trying to allow that hip hop is cool. They're trying to get their own little credit. But at the end of the day, what makes hip hop, like what made it really jump out into the consciousness of the United States and America as a whole, the world as a whole, is the music. The music. You know what I'm saying? The music is really the heartbeat of the entire shit, whether you want to admit it or not. And the music is created by black folk. Black folk in the Bronx, primarily. Were the people in other places in Queens and Brooklyn doing it? Maybe. Probably. Right? I've heard Grandmas the Flowers. I've heard of the Disco Twins or something like that. I've seen little things here and there where there are people in other boroughs that were doing certain things. Sure. But how many of them were Hispanic? Probably a very few. Now, just because you live in an area where there's also Hispanics doesn't mean that Hispanics were fucking with you. You know what I'm saying? We have to remember the world is becoming a lot less segregated. It's still quite segregated. I lived in Brooklyn. Okay, Brooklyn is segregated. Like, if you ask my honest opinion, even now, right? So the idea that like black folk and Hispanic folk were just hanging around together and creating hip hop together it is wild to me. It just doesn't seem accurate on any level, because that's the 70s, right? Right outside of the civil rights era, where black folk are still being hosed and shit like that. Okay, let's be honest here. And to be honest with you, Hispanics had their own thing going on, right? Tito Puente, all that shit that shit's fire. I fucks with Tito Puente, right? But again, it's like, why would you try to rewrite history, right? On any level, it doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense that the vast majority of people who were creating this hip hop scene were black folk in primarily the Bronx. I mean, that's just what it is, right? Racially, people weren't hanging around like that. You know what I'm saying? They just weren't. Shit, I mean, I was in the 90s, man, going to school in Saudi and getting nigga comments and shit. Even back in Canada, when I was hanging out in Canada. I went to school, I did grade 7 out here. And I did grade 7 in Canada, right? So this is the mid-90s. And I remember as a kid, within the first 3 days of coming to the new school, someone called me a nigga. So you're telling me that, in the 90s and stuff like that, when stuff is still racially weird and shit like that, it still is. It's not going to go away anytime soon. But somehow back in the 70s, like black and Hispanics were hanging around, and like white people were there too, creating. Get the fuck out of here! Come on, you're insulting our intelligence, okay? Now, again, does that mean that only black folk, made hip hop great? Of course not. What's great about hip hop is that black folk created that shit. They created something so dope that everyone else, other races, can get involved and do some cool shit with it too, and make it their own, if they choose to. That's what's great about fucking hip hop. You know what I mean? But again, this idea that like, the Hispanics were there, it's like, why? Like, why would you say that? And again, it just doesn't seem accurate to me. Grandmaster Caz himself has said that there was like one or two, Puerto Rican DJs. And Puerto Rican, by the way, and Puerto Ricans are quite different, in my honest opinion, from a lot of the Hispanics, because Puerto Ricans have arguably the most black sort of in them. And, when I look at even something like reggaeton, for example, a lot of times Puerto Rico sets trends, music trends, right, that the rest of the Latino population sort of adopts, right? So, again, it's not even like a lot of Puerto Ricans were into rap in the very, very beginning, right? They were a very few group of people. And so when you say that it's like all these Latinos, like, that doesn't sound accurate at all, okay? I will say this though, when I was listening to Lord Jamar, and this is I fuck with Lord Jamar because he has these interviews he does with Van Silk and Raheem and Radio Raheem from Furious 5, and he brings these sort of pioneers and legends out, and it's important, and we need to hear from them. One thing that is interesting is that obviously it kind of devolved into a bit of an argument, but the point is, it's tough. Human memory is fragile. And that's why it's important to try to record things, and obviously why I don't get into the the myth and all this shit of things. I'm not a myth person. If something sounds like a myth, I'm like, I just kind of like that sounds like a myth. You know what I mean? Because it's very easy for human beings to fall into the world of myth. Our memories are not that fragile. The moment something happens, it's gone. It's gone forever. If you really sit and think about it, right? 30 seconds ago, what I just said is gone, right? And the point is, we can capture it, we do our best to remember it, but without something being captured directly, and even when you're capturing something, for example, an event might have been happening in the 70s, someone's recording it. What perspective are they recording it from, right? Whether it be audio, visual, right? Are they capturing the whole story? Even as they attempt to capture the whole story of what's, let's say, for example, a building burning down in the Bronx, right? Even as they attempt to capture the whole story, they're only capturing one aspect of that story, right? There's no way they can capture the entire story of what happened that led to the building burning down, or even in that moment as the building is burning. It is extraordinarily hard to retain and capture exactly what happens in any situation. So, because of that, we obviously have to be, diligent and try our best to have multiple perspectives, right? I'm not mad at Fat Joe saying that. I mean, I am a little mad about him saying that Hispanics were there for 50. I think that's goofy. But I'm not mad at hearing a different perspective. What I think is disappointing, and is always disappointing with these outbursts for clout, for attention type, things that Fat Joe and other rappers do, is that they never provide any context. And in fact, when they do it, they're never asked to explain. They just make an outburst. And it's always derogatory. It's always something that's like dangerous. And it's up to people like me on the internet, randoms, or if the other pioneers want to step in, it's up to them to clean up the mess. But it's like, it shouldn't be like that, right? And I get it, for interview and media purposes. It's like, okay, you say this crazy thing, you don't have to explain it. We're not going to challenge you, because ultimately, we want to retain our relationship, and we don't even care about what you're saying. Like, we care about like just getting attention, so you can address it maybe the next time you come on, and you'll say a little minor thing, and then we move on, right? And the point is, no one learns anything, right? If in the conversation Fat Joe is asked to explain, why do you think this, because this is obviously not a typical opinion, you think that 50% of rap was created by Latinos, why? Like, what? Break it down, right? Someone should have said that shit, but they're not going to, because journalism and hip hop is always, I mean, not always, but it definitely is in the toilet now. It wasn't always like that. It really wasn't. Maybe it started out that way, but in those source era days, it felt like hip hop, journalism was really stepping up and asking the tough questions. Of course, now nobody does. Nobody asks the tough questions, right? So, long story short, my opinion is that obviously I think Fat Joe is bugging. I think he's bugging, right? And I think that it's yet another example of why black folk, foundational black folk, if we're going to go there, but I can understand why black Americans, particularly black New Yorkers, feel incensed about stuff like this, because it's like, it's a time-old tale of trying to write black folk out of their own creation. That shit is frustrating. It's racist as hell, and it's annoying as fuck. Okay? Like, why can't you just give credit? You know what I mean? I'm Igbo. I'm Nigerian. I didn't create hip hop. I'm not out here being like, I'm a hip hop creative, right? Like, now, black Americans, like a lot of black people, come from all kinds of places, right? Some of them may have come from Nigeria. Some of them may be Igbo. Fine. And as a black person, as I've said this before, as a black person, it's easy to understand, easier. I wouldn't say straight up fully easy, but it's easier for me to understand what hip hop is trying to do, because hip hop borrows from other things, particularly black music things, right? But I didn't create that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's fine, right? Like, not everybody has to be a creator, right? You can be a contributor, and that's totally fine. And I think the issue is when you start coming in and being like, oh, I'm going to rewrite the rules. I'm going to basically write the history. And you're clearly not somebody who created this shit. It's rude. You know what I'm saying? And you're trying to take away credit from those who actually, lost their lives a lot of times, really put their lives on the fucking line to create this culture that you love. and you probably make money off of. I mean, it's not enough to just see like, oh, I already make money off this shit. Now you have to try to rewrite the whole shit in your image. Like, what kind of ego is that, right? So I'm not a fan. And like I said, long story short, I don't think the Jamaicans created hip hop. I definitely don't think the Latinos created that shit. I think that when you look at hip hop, the music and what came out in that early 70s period, I think it's a very black American New York type thing, right? And that's fine. Give them their credit.